5, Jesus went through all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues and preaching the good news of the kingdom and healing every disease and sickness. And when he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest fields. So, like, I've long been intrigued by this instruction to ask the Lord of the harvest. One of the things that's most intriguing to me is, so, like, he's standing in front of his disciples, right? And he said, ask me to do this. Right? It's not like daring them, but maybe he was in a way daring them, but he just said, just ask me to do this. So why would he stand in front of these people and tell them to ask him, right? He could do it whether they asked him or not. But I think, so first off, you have to understand this scripture, right? It's a pivotal moment in history. History changed in this moment. The history of the earth changed in this moment. Because before that, Jesus was doing the work of God on earth, right? So Jesus started preaching in Capernaum, and then he went 2 miles north to Bethsaida, and then he went like 3 miles east to Chorazin. And he was going to all these little towns and villages along the northern shore of the Sea of Galilee. And he was overwhelmed by the need of the people. And he realized that he couldn't keep doing this. There had to be a different system. And so he called disciples, right? And then he called his disciples to him, and he said, here is the biggest problem on the face of the earth. The biggest problem on the face of the earth is that the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. That is the single biggest problem on the face of the earth. So, like, you thought it was Donald Trump, right? But it's actually that the harvest is plentiful and the workers are few. That's the big problem. Like, there's so many people waiting to come to Jesus, and there's so many people waiting to be harvested into the kingdom, and there's not enough people to do it. And so Jesus began to address the greatest problem on earth, and he called these disciples, and he said, just ask me. Just ask me to send out workers into the harvest field. And so I spent a lot of time trying to understand why he said this to them. But let me tell you a couple things that just asking him does. So asking him helps us to understand where we fit into the picture, right? He's God and we're not, right? So it helps us to understand that we do this as servants, right? We're servants of God. Like, we don't do this because we're entrepreneurs. We don't do this because we're skilled. We don't do this because we're going to get famous. We do this as a servant of God. Like, we ask him. And not only that, not only are we servants, but we're pretty powerless without him, right? That's why another reason we have to ask him. We have no power apart from him. And so we have to just ask him all the time, God, will you send out workers into the harvest field? Because we're powerless to do this and accomplish it on our own. Another reason he asked them to ask him is because asking Jesus is always the path to abundance. Right? So if you try to do it in your own strength, like, it's just struggle. But asking Jesus is the only path there is to abundance in the kingdom. And he wanted his disciples to understand this, that like the harvest is plentiful. There's abundance available out there. Like, we think, like, we lose sight of this, right? That there's abundance out there. But the harvest is plentiful, but the only path to abundance is to ask him. Here's another reason why we should ask him, because if Jesus doesn't send them, they won't go. Right? So we're all here because Jesus did something in our heart to send us. And people go when Jesus sends them. Like, people don't go when you send them, right? They go when Jesus sends them. First time I ever heard Bruce Bennett, right? And I was in Bangkok, Thailand, and I spent a week in a hotel, and he was doing these seminars. And I sat every day next to a Free Methodist guy from China. And about the third day, he leaned over to me and he said to me, while Bruce was talking, he says, "This stuff doesn't work." So I said, "So why doesn't it work?" And he said, because I was here last year, he said, and like I was all charged up, and I made a list of 20 people that I thought I could talk to about doing this. And he says, I went home and I talked to every one of them, and not one of them was interested. But it was pretty clear to me, right? He wasn't asking the people that Jesus sent. He was asking the people he thought should be doing this, right? It's a different thing between that and just thinking, wow, who's a good leader that I could ask to do this? And finding the people that Jesus has done something deep in their heart and compelled them, right, to go. So we ask him, because, all right, I'm going to stop. I could talk a lot about why we ask him, but I want to talk about this idea of getting to 1,000 churches. And so 3 years ago, should we turn this light off here?